Hi, Lara. Welcome.
Thank you
Thanks.
so much.
Yeah, thanks for joining me for Lead Time Chats. So let's just dive right in. The reality is we're a year into a pandemic, a full year now, and lots of people are depleted and low functioning. I mean, dare I say, most people.
Mhm.
And you've been coaching and training engineering managers, before the pandemic, during the pandemic, throughout. Um, how have you seen managers be able to effectively lead people in this situation? Both navigating, like, supporting the people on their teams and like holding them accountable for work getting done, and especially when the managers themselves may also be struggling and low functioning.
Yeah, I mean, what a nightmare, right? And it's weird that the thing that I found, like, is the theme running through it is that everybody's been really different in surprising ways. Like, some people thought this would be, really catastrophic and upend their lives, and they've been flourishing during
Yeah.
this time. And other people were like, I'm prepared. I'm great during crises, but this is a marathon, right?
Yeah.
And so it's been really interesting both for the managers themselves and for their teams. Like everything is a surprise for everybody.
Hmm.
So it's been a lot of like, okay, given that what we prepared for, what we expected, or how I thought it would be is not truly what's happened. Like, what do I do now? How do I pivot? How do I get over the surprise? And
So being adaptable to
yeah.
both your own resilience or reaction to everything that's going on, and everyone else's, right? Everyone's
Hmm.
going through the similar storm.
Exactly. And, one of the things that I found is really surprising is the managers who are flourishing, they're trying to
Mm.
be really empathetic, like they're not just like, I'm great, so everybody's great. They like really do
Mm.
understand that their situation is abnormal and like they
Hmm.
need to go the extra mile like everybody does. But for those managers that are also depleted, either it's like having to hold people accountable when they themselves are just burned out.
Yeah.
It's rough. So there's a couple of things that I've been talking through a lot with them in terms of like tactics and processes.
Hmm.
One is prioritizing one-way communication. So this
Mm.
is helpful for everybody involved. Often, I found, especially at the beginning of the pandemic, I'm sure you saw this too. Like managers are like, let's make like a happy hour. Let's all hang out. Like we're all isolated. Let's like be together. I mean, what a well-intentioned,
Hmm.
terrible.
Yeah.
Like no, everybody's drained. Like Zoom fatigue is a thing, and a lot of people had so many other commitments that they needed to give their
Yeah. They have
attention
kids
to.
at home.
Seriously, like I can't like a 5
Yeah.
p.m. Zoom is like I thank you for the intention, but like not going to work for me. So one-way
Yeah.
communication means like one to many and usually like an asynchronous medium, but it can also be synchronous. But like what are the
Mm.
ways that we can communicate where it's just one person communicating things that people need to know about or things that people would like to know about, things that will inform their predictability, their stability, their amount of
Hmm.
choice, like all the stuff that we care about. That like one to many tends to really help people's brains because they can watch it while they're doing something else. They can watch it with their cameras off. They don't
Hmm.
have to feel like they're going to be called on or need to be on at all. So that's been a
Hmm.
really helpful, like if you whatever you can do to make things one to many, please do it.
What kind of things do people usually not do one to many, but you encourage them to, like all hands type
All hands, absolutely.
announcements?
Like we don't need to have every single conversation be like, well, how do I want to take feedback and ask for questions? And like,
Hmm.
that's really useful. But what are the other asynchronous mediums where you can gather that
Hmm.
information?
Yeah.
And just like casual things like, okay, here's the holidays that are coming up. Here's the
Yeah.
PTO that's coming up. Here's what our new plan is for, being co-located again or not, like updates on that stuff. And really any changes in like company policies, what are we supporting? What are the refreshes for learning and development budgets and home office,
Yeah.
but it's all that stuff. What can we make just like even just stand-ups, honestly? Like how can we make the manager be like, okay, here's what we're expecting for the sprint, here's what we're looking for to get out of it. Here's this, here's the surprises that we are anticipating or that we're planning for.
Yeah.
Holler if I can support you all in it. Like Slack me or like we can talk about further in our one-on-one or rather than being like any questions, which people you're not going to get a response now. You might have
Yeah.
one or two people being like chomping in the butt to ask a question. I guarantee you everybody else is like, let
Get
me
me off
sign
this
off
Zoom.
of this call. Right? It makes
Yeah.
sense.
We do all our daily check-ins through Range. And so we don't have a Zoom daily thing. And
Totally.
it's like, it's so, I can't imagine having to get on. I mean, we do have other meetings, of course,
Of
but
course.
like we have like a midday social time, which is nice. I'm like, oh, this is during my work hours, not like
Right,
taking
right.
from my family time. Right. And it's,
Totally.
yeah. One
And
other
for
thing I
people who
found
want the
useful is
connection,
like,
it's like, oh, sorry.
oh, it's option. Yeah. And it's totally optional, right?
Right.
It's not like mandatory fun. Yeah. One other way I found one-way communication, even one-on-one, right? If people are struggling, right? So on range, sometimes people can mark themselves as red, which is like, I'm really not doing well. Or you know, if I know something's not going well, sometimes I'll just Slack them and be like, hey, no need to respond. That's kind of the one-way part of it, right? Even though it's one-on-one, like no need to respond, but like, you know, I figured you might be feeling a bit, you know,
Yeah.
upset about this situation. And like, I want to let you know that like, whenever, if you want to chat, like I'm here, but no need to respond, right?
I
Like,
love that. Yeah. Right. Because it feels like otherwise everything you're wondering, does my manager
yeah.
want me to respond to, are they asking a question that's like, do I need to read between the lines? Like that's all of those,
Right.
it's so much work. The
Right.
mental load is
It's
so
like
I
the
love
giving
that.
someone a baby shower present and be like, the gift, part of the gift is like, no thank you card needed. Right?
Yes.
Like,
Yes, absolutely. I love that the red, I assume it's like a red, yellow, green thing, right? Like I've been recommending this to a
mhm.
lot of folks, even in one-on-ones, just like a lightweight, how can we make our check-ins as lightweight as humanly possible? That red,
Yeah.
it can mean so many things to so many different people, but only having to say red and not having to explain the why, it's huge. Same for yellow.
Yeah.
Honestly, sometimes same for green. We might be doing great and just not want to talk
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah. Good. Just say one word. Yeah.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, and I mean that's when it comes down to one-on-one meetings especially.
Mhm.
Some people do want some time to process and share concerns or just like, talk about nothing for an hour just to have that social time. Other people, it just breaks their focus or, they just want to get their work done. So making sure that as a manager, you're like able to gather that data from them in a
Mhm.
way that feels not weird and not like it's going to reflect poorly on them in the performance review. Like that's a lot of people are worried about how they show up or what they ask
Yeah.
to be excused from because they're worried about how it's going to impact how people think of them going forward.
Yeah. This morning, I just was on the a moms in tech Facebook group I'm on, and people were talking about this, like, you know, having something where you share your mood on a mood elevator or something.
Yeah.
And some people were like, there is no way I'm gonna, there's
Right.
no, like, they don't feel safe in that environment. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's some people just are in some teams, you're just not going to feel safe saying like, wow, I am really struggling today.
Right. Right.
You know, I'm really fried. I'm at my wit's end. Like my, you know,
Right.
they're gonna worry about how that reflects on them.
Understandably. Now there's like the other extreme that I'm finding with lots of managers where they have direct reports that are just like, let me tell you about my childhood trauma. you know and like the manager stuck in this position to be like, I want to support my teammate, like I want
Yeah.
to make sure that they're okay, I want to be helpful, but like this is beyond my skill and expertise slash
Yeah.
like this is a therapy conversation. Or I've been thinking a lot recently about those energy draining one-on-ones where you just kind of dread one-on-ones with any one or two people because it's going to be a lot. So
Mhm.
for those managers that are struggling with that, what we talk through a lot of is like, okay, how can we set appropriate boundaries? You do have to help them, right?
Mm.
You are responsible for keeping them safe and making sure that they have what they need, but that's for work. Like you are not responsible for making sure that they have what they need in their personal childhood trauma section of their
Mhm.
life, right? So helping, managers think they're okay, what is my role? What do I want my role to be? In
Mhm.
addition to maybe how my work describes my role, how do I want to show up for these people and where can I define that boundary? Like I'm
Mhm.
sure, you and I having gone through coach training, they talk to us about this. Like coaching oversimplified is like
Mhm.
work focused and future focused. And
Mhm.
therapy tends to be past focused and personal life focused. So as coaches, we get
Mhm.
training like, here's a way to like nudge the conversation to be work focused and, future
Yeah.
like got it. It sounds like that was a really hard experience. It sounds like that's bringing up a lot for you. How is this showing up for you at work? What can we do to create
Mm.
support
Mhm.
systems, or what can I do to support you going forward? And really
At
trying to
work.
drive it. Yeah, exactly. At work. Um, and like coming up with a line that's like, got it. It sounds like that's really important for you. I can't provide that. I'm not equipped, or I don't have the skill
Mhm.
set, or there's got to be someone with some training that can be helpful to you. I
Mhm.
unfortunately can't do that, but what I can do is help with again, work focused, like keep on redirecting as much as possible. So we
Hmm.
practice that in coaching sessions. And for some people, it's like, okay, thank goodness I have like a line I can
The
say.
go-to line, yeah.
For other people, they just get sucked in because they really want to help. And that's
They want to,
so,
yeah.
so hard.
Yeah, I find, yeah, with coaches, I think that's a common. You want to help, so if someone comes to you with something they need help with, it's hard to be like, can't help you with that. Like,
Right.
let's move on, or let's refocus, right?
Yeah. But managers too, it's just because they care,
Yeah.
and they really want to help. But especially if you as a manager at the end of your tether, it's hard to have the energy to be useful or be helpful. So that's why, like, what's your role? Figuring out what your role is
Hmm.
for today and for this season. What's the number one thing you're optimizing for? Or what's your North Star? How do you want to be for your teammates? That can be a
Hmm.
helpful reframe to be like, okay, here's where I should put my priorities. And here's what I need to say
Yeah.
no to because it doesn't fit with what that role is today or
Right.
the energy I have to give.
Yeah. One thing I've personally also found useful is just thinking about like what's actually in my control, right? Like,
Yes.
someone having some conflict with their spouse, like
Right.
that all is not in my control. Like I can maybe help them lightly, but
Right.
I'm not going to be couples counseling them and help them resolve that, right? And so kind of getting clear on like what is the sphere of influence you have, and then trying to let go of the things outside of that is a way that I think managers can um, take care of themselves and set bound or be a little bit clearer about boundaries, especially when they want to be helpful.
Totally. Yeah. I don't know about you, but I definitely had, people that I work with, I just cared so deeply for, and I just ended up
Yeah.
worrying about them off hours. And for so many managers, like, how do you turn that off? It's a good instinct, But
Yeah.
again, I like to reframe it as like, okay, you need to be a teammate for all of these people, not just this one person. And like this comes
Mm.
up in like normal performance review conversations too. Like, how much time are we spending working with someone who needs a lot of our attention
Mm-hmm.
versus everybody we need to be supporting right now, and doing some math around like, okay, what's the right amount to give? That way I can make sure my oxygen mask is on so that I can
Right.
also be available and useful to everybody else who needs to lean on me too.
Yeah. One thing you mentioned before was that people are responding to the situation we're in very different and sometimes unexpected ways. And
Totally.
one thing I've noticed is that there are people who are visibly struggling, and that shows up in their work. And then there's some people who are doing fine in their work. And so but you want to make sure you do check in with everyone, right? This is what I've
Yeah.
heard from friends and stuff too. Like people are able to escape into their work, so they may seem extremely productive, but if you're like, if you then translate that to like, oh, they're doing fine, like that may not be the case.
100%. And
Yeah.
that's why, again, I love the red, yellow, green. Because, like, again, they might be looking really green.
like
But you
like
ask them,
PR's
right?
green,
Yeah, yeah,
like
everything
emotional
is
state
shipping,
red.
right? Exactly. And so I love that, as just like again a lightweight way. We don't need to go into it if they don't want to. There's so much wrapped up in here about like as a manager, you don't push people to share with you what they're really enduring right now. Like they may not, it might be more work for them to explain what's going on for them, but find a way
Yeah.
to check in. And also, I'm sure you've had this experience, asking someone what they need doesn't work. Like, okay, what do you need right now? Pretty much no one has the answer to that question. Otherwise, they would probably have already asked for
Mm-hmm.
it. So I recommend that as managers, we think about one or two solutions that we can offer and say,
Mm.
or something else, like,
Yeah.
okay, like I get it. You're red right now. It seems like you're shipping on time. Uh, would it be more helpful to talk through what you're going through in this one-on-one, or skip this one-on-one entirely, or something else, right? And again,
Mm.
having this something else opens the door for them to choose something new, but having some
Yeah.
specifics where they can just have a choice can really decrease the energy needed for them to expend to get to where they need to be.
Yeah, I love that. And even just like it reminds people who are, struggling and low functioning, the options that are available to them, right? Like, remember you have PTO, right? Like,
Exactly.
remember you can take a day off. And if you need, yeah, like, remember you can do that. We kind of reiterated that a ton during, the
Totally.
election season and all that. Like, remember you can take time off. You have PTO, right? And just like
Yeah.
really, really gentle nudges for people if they want to take time off, or if they want to escape into their work, like that's fine too.
100%. I see a lot of managers concerned about that. I see some managers like
Mm,
mandating time off, and that is a risky move because who
mm,
knows what you are asking them to go and face. Like for some
mm,
people, the work is feeling so much healthier than
Yeah.
not working it. So like, again, giving people options. And I love that, reinforcing, hey, even like minimum PTOs, just like, hey, please, 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 this is here for a reason, I promise. And
Yeah.
modeling it though, too, right? Because I find that if managers are
Mhm.
not modeling the behaviors that they want to see in their teammates aren't going to do it. It doesn't feel safe.
Right. Right. What are other ways, you've talked about setting boundaries, modeling the behavior for managers who are really struggling and still having to lead? What are some other ways that they can better take care of themselves first so that they can also support their team?
Totally. I've been a huge proponent of defragging your calendar for a long time, right? And by that, I
Mhm.
mean like checking in on how much your current meeting schedule and when you have meetings and how often
Mhm.
you have meetings is draining your energy, specifically
Yeah.
like the kinds of meetings. Context switching is so hard. Having lack of
Mhm.
focus time is so hard. Sometimes volume of one-on-ones is unbearable. Like we all have a good, like healthy amount that we can have in a day. Mine's like 3 a day is my max. Even
Mhm.
coaching, I love it, but it's emotionally draining. So taking a
Yeah.
look at your calendar, scooching things around if possible to kind of mitigate some of that energy drain and give you the re-energizing focus time should that be useful to you. Everybody's
Mhm.
going to have a different looking calendar. Everybody's going to have a different things that give them energy and things that deplete their energy, so it's going to be custom, but you have my permission to go and revisit. Especially
Yeah.
long-standing recurring meetings. Would they be
Mhm.
better, again, one to many versus like an interactive component? In
Yeah.
what ways can we kind of decrease the need for people to have their brains on and engaged, including you as a manager?
Yeah. And making more. Yeah. One thing I noticed was that we have something called product collab times, and we had it twice a week. We've shifted it to once a week, and they were like 1 p.m. and I felt like it cut into my Thursday, Tuesday focus time, and so I just brought it up in a meeting, and I was like, hey, like how many of you, thumbs up if you would prefer it to be earlier in the morning so that you could have more focus time in the afternoon. Because looking at most of the engineers' calendars, it was like
Mm,
afternoon time. It was really the only meeting, right?
fascinating.
And there was some like historic reason why it was at that time, and then we just moved it. It's like now everyone has these afternoons free for focus work, right? And kind of get all your meetings done in the mornings, and then um yeah,
That's
it
magical.
was great. And
Right.
just
And like,
the long-standing meetings, a lot of times people don't feel like they can move them, right? Like,
yeah.
oh, there's a good reason they're there, and maybe that reason is not relevant anymore, right? Who knows? At the beginning of the pandemic, we had all sorts of restrictions, so just revisiting them, and then also
Yeah.
modeling to people that like these things can be moved around, like raise a flag if you feel like it's not working for you.
And we're all engineers here. Run it as an experiment.
Yeah.
Like you don't have to say, here's how it is from here on out. Give it time box it.
Right.
Something you're gonna check in on, once you've run through that time and like see if you want to change it again. Like there's no rules here.
Yeah, yeah, and that's also just I remember reading Kate Houston's post about like yeah, like people really are averse to process changes, but you
Yeah,
just say it's an experiment. Say we're going to
totally.
run it as a pilot. We're going to run it as an experiment for 2 weeks, and then check back in. Be like, oh, cool,
Yeah.
that sounds great.
Everybody loves it, especially if you say what you're
Yeah,
checking in on. Like we're gonna, we're gonna send a
yeah.
2-question survey afterwards about whether or not this is working for you,
Hmm.
or how much focus times do you get back, or like name a thing. Be specific about the thing that you think people are really in need
Hmm.
of right now. You've heard in one-on-ones people really need more of right now. And
Yeah.
say it. I used to work for a CTO who made sure that any recurring meetings had an expiration date of 6 months. It was like, and in the
Oh.
final meeting, there was like intentional agenda item, like, okay, we're going to check in if we should re-up this again. And if so, what changes should we make to the format of the agenda or the time or the frequency? And it was
Hmm.
not always, it didn't always like, we didn't always remember to do it, but like just knowing that we had permission to set things for 6 months. And I would say even shorter
Hmm.
these days, like run it for 3 months and see what you want to change. Yeah, it can be a really helpful reminder. Like this doesn't have to be this way forever.
Yeah. I've heard of couples doing that for like
Ooh,
relationships.
that's funny. I can see that working.
Yeah, it's like just being really intentional, like, hey, is this working or not, and not
Right.
defaulting to like we're just in it forever.
Yes, totally. Because again, so much of this is like by accident, right? We
Hmm.
came, as you said, like we
Right.
made some decisions at the beginning of the pandemic that have stuck around because we didn't
Hmm.
put in a check-in point. We didn't
Yeah,
talk about it
we were
as an
like,
experiment.
oh, we're going to remote, like let's just cobble together something,
Right.
and not thinking like now we're stuck with it for a year
Yeah.
plus.
Exactly. Well, so to anybody watching this, you have both of our
Mhm.
permission to like go and run some experiments, you know?
Yeah.
It's really, it can be so like re-energizing to know that you have
Mhm.
that choice, right? That autonomy over, yeah, how your day is supposed to look.
Cool. So defragging your calendar. Any other last minute tips?
I mean, we've covered so much ground here. I'm really hopeful that people are going to be able to
Yeah.
like get some energy back, put their oxygen mask on.
Yeah, for sure. Take care of yourself so that you
Yeah,
can support your team and whoever else needs you at home as well.
precisely. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you so much, Lara. This was so helpful. I'm sure everyone will get a lot out of it.
Truly a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.